Thank you, George. In other news, police have arrested Pascaline Peter, popularly known as Passy Matreva, the main suspect in a scam where hundreds of Kenyans lost millions of shillings.
But that doesn't mean
that you don't have money. So your pesa iko wapi?
At least they know kuna property fulani iko mahali fulani.
What makes you think? Unajua sasa kuna watu wanasema na watu. Mimi nasikia figures zinasema 500 million mpaka watu siwaje.
Pasi pesa unajua ni how much like
On April 29th, 2024, inside the elegant halls of the Safari Park Hotel, a young woman walked onto a stage to tell a story of success. Her name was Pascaline Peter. To many, she was proof that life could change, from struggle to CEO. At the time, she was the face behind Pafrim Investments, a fast-rising real estate company. In fact, just a week after its launch, the company had already won an award as an emerging brand. And as she sat among industry players waiting for her moment to speak, everything about her said one thing: she had made it. But behind that success, a system was already quietly building pressure. And what no one in that room knew was that this moment was the beginning of the end. Because just weeks later, the same woman on that stage would be sitting inside a Kenyan women's prison facing fraud charges. Millions gone, and hundreds of victims suffering her wrath. Unfortunately, her investment plan would collapse almost overnight. But here's the part that doesn't make sense. How did a Facebook influencer convince so many people to trust her with their life savings? How did one woman scam people over 80 million shillings? And what really happened in the 40 days leading up to before everything fell apart? Welcome. This is Dark Hour Docs. At first, Pascaline Peter wasn't a scam story. She was a success story. After her appearance at the Safari Park Hotel, her image only grew stronger online. She was a CEO, an influencer, and an activist, a woman who had built herself from nothing. But her rise didn't start with business. It started with survival. Years earlier, around 2017, Pascaline was going through one of the hardest periods of her life. She had been diagnosed with HIV/AIDS, and at one point, she stopped taking her medication, a habit that was taking a toll on her body. Her health deteriorated quickly, and life began to collapse around her. She was broke, unstable, and without a clear future. At one point, she even posted on socials that the person she was supposed to hang out with left her stranded after his girlfriend showed up. In her own words, she said that she had nowhere to sleep, was stranded in Nairobi, and slept in strangers' car. In another post, she said that her rent arrears resulted in her house being locked by the landlord, and that the clothes she was wearing on that day were borrowed. Pascaline was simply trying to survive in Nairobi, trying to stay afloat in whatever way she could. Coupled with life's hard knocks, she was slowly pulled under by it all, and in that darkness, she found herself on a dangerous path of self-loathing and despair. At her lowest point, she felt like she couldn't go on. This cycle of self-sabotage left her drained, broken, and more isolated than ever. But eventually, due to failure to take medication, her condition worsened to a point where her family had to intervene. She was taken to Kenyatta National Hospital, where she began treatment and recovery. Here, her health was not only restored, but also her hope that life would get better. And that moment changed everything, because she not only experienced medical recovery, but also psychological rebirth. She began speaking openly about her condition, at a time when very few people were willing to, especially online. Her message was simple: live openly, accept your status, and don't give up on treatment. It was raw, it was personal, and it spread fast. People started paying attention and listening to her, not because she was polished, but because she was real. This meant that her Facebook page began growing rapidly, her influence grew, and she started appearing in interviews. Here, she shared her story publicly, often without payment. And slowly, she became a known voice in the space of HIV awareness. But what made her different wasn't just a message, it was how people responded to her. They didn't just listen, they believed. Through her transparency, she was able to build emotional trust with her followers. And that trust became powerful, because once people believe your story, they stop questioning your intentions. From there, she expanded. She started selling clothes online, then organizing small fundraisers. Like in this post, she urged people to purchase items like clothes and duvets from her as a sign of support. She presented this as support for causes and personal struggles. At first, it looked harmless, even helpful. Supporters contributed willingly. Some donated small amounts, others gave more than they could afford. And every time, the community defended her strongly. Whenever doubts were raised, they were shut down immediately. That kind of protection created something dangerous: immunity. Because when criticism is rejected automatically, accountability disappears. And unfortunately, this is where her association with scamming the same people that believed in her begun. Pascaline was now at a point of no return, since trust she had gotten from her followers had become absolute. And now she was ready to use this trust however possible for her own financial gain. By September 28, 2024, Pascaline Peter had already crossed a dangerous line. What started as charity had quietly transformed into calculated exploitation. At first, it didn't look like a scam, because nothing about it started as fraud. It was trust that was slowly turned into opportunity, since people already believed in her name. So when money started entering the picture, no one questioned her. The scam was easy and began quietly with small financial appeals at first. Then it later turned into structured requests disguised as support for growth. A Facebook post dated June 18, 2023, exposes the origin of the scheme. What appeared to be a charitable group, Meta Family, was allegedly turned into a profit-making operation by Pascaline. According to a confession, contributions were manipulated and shared internally instead of reaching beneficiaries. Leaders of the scheme, or the high table, faked contributions to maintain trust. Also, cases of charity needs were made up and rotated strategically, almost like shifts in a business. They posted emotional content like families in distress, and this was used to trigger donations quickly. People who trusted her instantly raised funds, which were split among insiders, sometimes daily. Even more disturbing, there were schemes involving staged charity visits. These involved changing clothes, taking photos, and leaving. All this was purely performative in order to raise money. By the end of 2023, the scheme had evolved into something even darker. At some point, a death in the community, something deeply emotional and sensitive, was also used as a tool for financial gain. Donations were collected in the name of her grieving family, which were never delivered. The post describes signs of disconnect from the real family during this period of mourning. Without shame, Pascaline had successfully ran fundraising scams disguised as acts of charity, not to help others, but to benefit herself. She asked for help to expand her work, support her new direction, and a plea for people to be a part of something bigger. And people responded the same way they always had, by giving abundantly. Most of these scams were gladly called out by some quotas for being untruthful, and her sudden lifestyle change was enough proof. However, as usual, her cultic following always shut them down and rescued her, since they believed these people were jealous of Pascaline. Over time, Pascaline started feeling invisible, and this led her to the next scam. And this time, she didn't hesitate. She changed the narrative completely, from survival to success, and from struggling to business. In her words, this was no longer about survival. It was opportunity. She created a Ponzi scheme by first claiming that she was a risk taker who had started her business with just 200,000 shillings. Through lending, Pascaline claimed that she was operating with over 2 million shillings a month. So in short, she first built trust by presenting herself as a successful moneylender, handling large amounts. Then she started using other people's money, claiming there was high demand and steady returns. From there, she attracted investors by promising very high monthly profits of 23.5%. But instead of real profits, the system depended on new investors' money to sustain payouts and her lifestyle. And when she was in full control of the access to the money, she introduced a new model. She was the one lending the money on behalf of others and taking a cut, 5%. Despite the scheme having sound structure and even professional, the reality is she wasn't just lending anymore. She was now building a con which relied on trust and pushed more people to put their money in as investors. And sadly, many people emptied their savings into the scheme, hoping to acquire riches. By mid-2024, a lot of people had come forward claiming that they had been scammed of their hard-earned money. At the comfort of her newly found rich lifestyle, Pascaline Peter partied often. She slept on a 500,000 shillings bed and fed her dog spaghetti and chicken. This was all after scamming across hundreds of people who had trusted her. Surprisingly, she did all these while saying, "God, your daughter is grateful." She lived a crazy lifestyle at the expense of her investors. Some had even invested their hospital money in her scheme with fake promises of profits on returns. Her victims patiently waited for quick returns that never came. Pascaline took their money, built a palatial home, bought cars for her lover's company, and funded their expensive lifestyle. However, sooner than later, investors realized she was sending the same recycled messages. Then she vanished. Panic spread. Her days were now numbered. On April 29, 2024, just a week before her downfall, Pascaline Peter had spoken at the Power 300 breakfast at Safari Park Hotel as the CEO of Pafrim Investments, the same land-selling company that had mysteriously won an award for being the best emerging brand just a week after its launch. This alone showed how inauthentic her dealings were, because how they managed to win this award, nobody will ever know. Gladly, with increasing complaints, the police were on her case. A week later, the DCI tracked her when she was sneaking into her house at night. She was cornered and taken to face charges. As complaints mounted, victims kept speaking out.
So your pesa iko wapi? Kasi pesa unajua ni how much, like consider to depressed that is tuambie yetu. When are you like
kama ya huyu mtu mwenye alikuwa anaandikia saisi yake ni 8 million.
Nani?
Huyu mzee anaitwa nani hapa? Nimeandika mimi statement sahihi.
Some had lost life savings. Others borrowed heavily, only to watch their money vanish. The sheer scale of the fraud, over 80 million shillings from 79 people, was what had drawn investigators. Authorities pieced together bank transfers, false contracts, and testimonies. The trail led directly to Pascaline and her associate, George Wutunga. Her arrest was inevitable. Police cornered her in Nairobi, charging her with obtaining money by false pretenses. In court, the influencer stood accused of exploiting trust and manipulating hope. The prosecution laid bare her scam, impossible returns, online popularity, and targeting desperate Kenyans. Eventually, Pascaline was caught because her greed had no limits. There's no scheme offering guaranteed riches of that kind that survives forever. Victims united, investigators acted, and the illusion collapsed. And in the end, it wasn't just money that was lost, it was belief. This has been Dark Hour Docs. Thank you for watching.